Everyday life's happening. Some days are more eventful. Others, living protected with insurance you can depend on changes your life for the better. We insure the people and things you care about. Not Agency. We'll help you find the right coverage so when life happens, you have the right insurance protection for your family and business. When life happens, live protected. Agency for all your insurance needs.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Tuesday, January the 3rd, 2017. We're still getting used to saying 2017. It's good to have you with us today. I've got Walter Bargen, who is Missouri's first poet laureate, dating back to 2008. Good to have you here.
Great to be here, Paul.
Yeah, 2008, you were the first poet laureate for our state. How many have they had since you?
They just recently appointed the fourth person, and that is Aliki Barnstone.
And what?
Her name is Aliki Barnstone.
Oh, Aliki, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
But now you today are going to read a couple of poems. One dealing with an ice storm?
Yes.
Not snakes today.
Not snakes, okay. Although I considered reading something about snow snakes.
Yeah. Well, since we had, a couple of weeks ago, we had that ice that ran a lot of cars off the road for several days. This is somewhat appropriate.
Yes, that's what caused me to think that this would be a good poem to read, because our collective memory seems to have failed us when you look down the road and saw so many cars in ditches and trucks flipped over on the side of the road.
Yeah.
It's like, what happened? How did people forget about how difficult it is to drive on ice?
Well, you know, that ice of a couple of weeks ago just kind of snuck up on us. We weren't really prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It was a fine mist that just kept building up, but it didn't build up much, but it was enough to make
So
everything
what's the name
slip.
of this one?
This poem is called Icebound.
Okay.
And it's a story of a day when school is canceled, and my daughter and I are sitting in the living room. I am surrounded by translations of a book called The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, who wrote it 2,500 years ago, if any of this is actually true and not just something that somebody put together along the way.
All right, so here's Walter Bargen with Icebound.
Sky's gray sheet spreads icy rain. Through the night we heard the branches cracking. Now they bend with the bowed ache of apostrophes. Backs to the window, sitting on the couch, we listen as the radio announces the list of schools closed. An hour earlier, I inched my way along the road, tires spinning toward the ditch. Now I read aloud to a teenage daughter who tolerates my foolishness, my claim that Lao Tzu traversed a more slippery world. With two books open on my lap, one in my hand, two on the floor, I'm surrounded by imperfect translations, a gathering chaos, something mysteriously formed, without beginning, without end, formless and perfect. She responds, "Sure, I knew that, so what?" I persist, that existed before the heavens and the earth, before the universe was born. She's ready to go upstairs and listen to the radio. I ask, what was her face before her parents were born? She answers, nothing. I ask again. She says it again. Where are the angels, knights on humble knees, the psalms of faith, the saints of daylight? She walks out of the room. I'm surrounded by thin books. How pointless to go anywhere on this day, or maybe any other. But then the time comes when there is no other way but to stand firm on ice.
I like that. Icebound. And you were painting a picture of the trees and the limbs cracking and snapping. And we didn't quite have that a couple of weeks ago, but I remember about 3 or 4 years ago when we had that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You got one more poem?
I have one more that
Deal with winter?
that deals with winter. It's called Civilized Sacrifice. And this particular poem is 8 stanzas long. Robert Hass, a former poet laureate of the United States, said that every good poem contains its opposite. And in this particular case, and this poem really is kind of working with that in mind, although when I wrote it I didn't have that in mind. The first 4 stanzas describe my experiences hiking in the mountains, and the second 4 stanzas deal with a mummified girl who was found on top of a peak in the Andes.
Okay.
And it's contrasting those 2 experiences.
Okay.
And the Incas believed that the mountains were gods. So that explains this opening line. I have climbed the backs of gods too. It's not so strange, dressed in heavy coat and boots, hat pulled down to the eyebrows, cheeks windburnt, gloved fingers numb, and each brief breath preyed upon, each step thrown onto the loose altar of stone. Blinded by spires of light, I've looked away as the unblemished blue splintered in all directions, and I've backed away from the sheer precipice, the infinite suddenly a fearful measure, the way down to tundra and the jagged maze of granite, leaving only a crevice in which to cower. I've lain on the steep slopes of night under spruce, wrapped against rain and cold, and watched clouds explode in my face. Stark boughs reached, then sagged back in sweeping, resolute silence. I was shaken loose by thunder and lightning, like the small girl named Juanita by strangers. She tumbled 100 yards down Novato Amparo Peak, her whereabouts unquestioned for 500 years, until a nearby volcano began a festering eruption, thawing the slope, and wrapped in her elitely a shawl woven in the ancient Cusco tradition, wearing a toucan and parrot-feathered headdress, her frozen fetal posture a last effort at warmth above tree line, amid ice fields, there to address and redress for rain and maize, for full vats of fermenting beer, plentiful llama herds for the civilized sacrifice, to be buried alive and wait in private, as we all do, to speak with our gods, hoping to appease, to know, to secure the elusive cosmic machinery. And in that last numb moment, her left hand gripped her dress for the intervening centuries.
How many poems have you written?
I don't know. I don't keep count.
Hundreds.
Oh yes. I'd say probably at least 600 or 700, maybe more.
Now that's a talent. If people want your any of your books, how can they get them?
Well, my website is www.walterbargen.com, and you can find them at some titles at Barnes & Noble and some at Yellow Dog Books.
All right. Walter, thank you so much. And please come back again.
Yes.
And Happy New Year to you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Tomorrow, National Federation for the Blind. Our program directed by Travis McMillen, Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio is Pat Akers from KBIA. Our floor director is Maggie Noble. And our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. We'll see you tomorrow.